Now then, how you doing? I hope you're well. In 2004, my first book, Drawing Towards Watercolour, was published by David and Charles. To accompany the book, a demonstration video was commissioned by the SAA, featuring work filmed on location. Myself and a small camera crew of 2 visited the Roaches in the Peak District to explore the processes involved in sketching and painting rocks. I recently revisited the Roaches, partly out of nostalgia, but also partly to see how I might reimagine the subject in watercolour after that gap of approximately 12 years. Here's how I got on. As rocky gritstone ridges go, the Roaches is pretty spectacular. With the easily recognisable Hen Cloud at one end and the mysterious Lud's Church at the other, the Great Escarpment overlooks Tittersworth Reservoir and is only a stone's throw away from the small Staffordshire town of Leek. It was once famous for a colony of wallabies released into the wild there from a private collection in the 1930s. I can't help but think that more recent sightings are nothing more than wishful thinking. The Roaches haven't changed much in 12 years. Pity I can't say the same for myself. There was a time I'd be bounding up to the top like a young gazelle. It's great to be back though, after a long break, and I can't wait to start painting. My first job is to draw the scene out onto watercolour paper. I like to use burnt umber for this instead of pencil. Well, there are various reasons for this, but one primary reason is because if I draw it out in pencil, then I feel I have to keep within the lines, and it can sometimes feel like it's just a pencil drawing that I'm filling in. Well, there's a real pleasure to drawing out in paint. If you've never done it before, then I recommend you try it at least once. Of course, you may find you hate it, but you never know until you try these things. Once I'm happy with my drawing, I'm going to start by thoroughly wetting the paper and then applying a wet-in-wet wash. For this, I'm going to use cadmium yellow, cadmium red and French ultramarine. I don't know what it is about the Roaches that makes me only want to paint them at sunset or sunrise. Maybe it's because the dramatic location just calls for it. After all, sunset and sunrise are for an artist the best times of the day. The colours are richer and the shadows longer. Lovely. Whatever it is, true to form, I've opted for a warm sky. It's a wet in wet wash, of course, so that means working quickly so that the three colours fuse together in an aesthetically pleasing way and don't dry too quickly. Otherwise, there would be a danger of hard lines or worse, backruns. In watercolour, we work from light to dark, so that dictates the order in which I apply the three colours, finishing up with the French ultramarine and taking care so as not to obliterate the red. The last thing I need to do before it all dries is to twist out the orb of the sun with a small piece of tissue. While I have the colours still fresh in my palette, this would seem like a good time to paint in the background hills. Once again, I'm working light to dark, so it's cadmium yellow first, followed by cadmium red, and then a small amount of French ultramarine. I could simply have used French ultramarine, of course, but I decided I wanted the colours to permeate through the scene as much as possible. It also helps to enhance the glow of the sun. Moving on, the natural progression from this is to start painting in the rocks. For this, I've mixed French ultramarine and burnt umber together to create a light grey. I'm going to apply it to the whole of the foreground rocks, dropping in a tiny amount of cadmium yellow just to vary it slightly. Note how I've painted around the grass along the bottom edge, leaving the grass blades as untouched negative highlights. As I've already stated, in watercolour we work from light to dark. It's also a transparent medium, a property which we should exploit as often as possible. Overlaying washes upon other washes creates new tones and colours without the need for constant remixing. With this in mind, I'm applying a second, slightly darker mix of the same grey colour to the rocks, only this time it isn't a blanket coverage. I'm breaking it down in order to explain its contours. These rocks have been shaped over many centuries. Its many crevasses and lumpy bits are the result of extensive erosion from the elements, the result of which is a natural feature of the landscape. Generating the random element is one of the hardest things we have to do in watercolour. The worst thing I could do to the roaches would be to make them appear too geometric, or to introduce repetitive patterns. One of the ways in which I can keep it random is to soften off some of the brush marks with a damp brush. This way, I can achieve some variation with regards to hard edges and soft edges. I'm also able to encourage small accidents to happen. Sadly, the things that we don't plan are often the best bits. It's all about creating contrasts. By placing a dark tone against a light tone, not only does it create an edge, but it often has the effect of pushing that edge forwards. I can use this effect to gradually build up my scene and hopefully create the illusion of depth and space. Clearly, the rocks require a lot of work to build them up in this way. But before I start applying anything darker, I just want to add a few details to the hill in the background. I've mixed up a warm colour from cadmium red and burnt umber, with just a hint of French ultramarine to tone it down. The hill is known as Hen Cloud, a distinctive pointy promontory at the eastern edge of the Roaches, a well-known local landmark in its own right, in fact. I'm also going to take this opportunity to add a bit of colour to the foreground grasses. For this, I'm using cadmium yellow with a few drops of burnt umber thrown in to make it interesting. There's just one last thing I need to do. With all this lovely warm sunlight permeating throughout the scene, it's logical to assume that some of the colour would extend to the surface of the rocks. I've mixed up cadmium yellow and cadmium red, and I'm applying it to a few of the upper surfaces, then softening them off with a damp brush. This dramatic corner of the Peak District is always worth a visit. If you can visit at sunrise or sunset, well, that's even better. It's when the Roaches look their best. Well, I hope you enjoyed that trip down memory lane. I know I did. Places like the Roaches, shaped by thousands of years of erosion by the elements, don't change much in 12 years. The way we paint does though. Until next time, take care.